Her fingers trembled as she dug into the red, dry earth behind her hut. The moonlight revealed her wide, frightened eyes and the small bundle she clutched against her chest. The baby whimpered, a faint cry that pierced the still night. She looked around nervously, making sure no one was watching. Then, with a deep, shaky breath, she placed the baby into the shallow hole she had made. But before she could push the earth over the tiny body, the ground began to move. The soil shifted as if alive, and a strong, cold wind rushed up from beneath. A strange voice, deep and powerful, echoed from the earth. "Return what you did not create, or you will pay with more than your life." She froze, her body shaking violently. The baby's eyes opened wide, glowing faintly in the darkness. The woman screamed, dropped the handful of soil, and stumbled backward. And then, something began to crawl out of the hole. The village of Alemba lay in the heart of a green valley, surrounded by tall palm trees that danced in the wind. The people were proud, hard-working, and deeply tied to their traditions. Each morning, the air filled with the sound of pestles pounding yam, children laughing, and the sweet aroma of palm oil sizzling in clay pots. Life here was simple but rich. People shared what they had, even in hard times. Neighbors could knock on your door and ask for salt, and you would give without question. If a roof leaked, men from across the village would come together to fix it. If someone fell sick, the women would take turns cooking for the family. The elders taught the children that a child belongs to the community. No one was raised alone. It was this belief that gave the people of Alemba their peace. A good life here was not about riches. It was about kindness, honesty, and respect for life. One of the women in the village, Adana, was known for her beauty and sharp tongue. Her skin glowed like polished bronze, and her eyes could pierce straight through you when she was angry. She loved fine clothes and gold trinkets and had little patience for anything, or anyone, that slowed her dreams of a better life. People whispered about her arrogance, but no one could deny she was clever. Adana had married a trader from a far-off town, a man who promised her a life of comfort. But he left one day and never came back, leaving her with an infant daughter named Chica. Some said he died on the road. Others claimed he ran off with another woman. Either way, Adana was left with no husband, no money, and a child she did not want. The people of Alemba expected her to swallow her pride and accept help, but Adana refused. She worked in the fields, but instead of saving her earnings, she spent them on fine headscarves and shiny earrings she wore to the market. Whenever she held Chica, she did so with stiff arms, as though the baby was a burden. One quiet evening, the village gathered for the moon dance, a celebration of the harvest. Women sang in circles, their voices rising into the night, while men drummed and clapped. Adana arrived wearing a bright red wrapper and gold beads that shimmered under the moonlight. She danced gracefully, but she did not look at her baby, who lay in a woven basket by the side of the gathering. The older women frowned, whispering among themselves. That night, as people laughed and feasted, Adana overheard two women talking. "Such a shame," one said, shaking her head. "A child is a blessing, no matter the hardship." "Some hearts are too selfish to see it," the other replied. Adana's face tightened. She walked away from the fire and into the shadows. Her mind raced. She thought of how free she could be without Chica, free to travel, free to marry again, free to chase the life she wanted. And in the quiet darkness, a cold decision began to grow inside her heart. The next day, she told the neighbors she was going to fetch firewood from the far end of the forest. She strapped Chica to her back, gathered a small hoe, and walked toward the bush. The villagers thought nothing of it. After all, it was common for women to take their babies along when working in the fields. But Adana did not stop where others collected wood. She walked deeper into the forest, where the trees grew thick and the air was damp. Her steps slowed as she reached a small clearing hidden by wild shrubs. There, she set Chica down and began to dig. The baby's soft cries rose into the air. Adana's hands trembled, but she kept digging. The hole was not deep, but she convinced herself it was enough. She looked around. The forest was silent except for the rustle of leaves in the wind. She lifted Chica gently, not because of love, but because she feared someone might hear if the baby cried louder. She placed her in the hole and reached for the first handful of soil. But just as the dirt began to fall, a shadow passed over her. The air grew cold and a strange low hum filled her ears. She froze and turned toward the trees. Two glowing eyes stared back at her from the darkness. Her heart leapt into her throat. She stumbled backward, nearly falling into the hole with her child. The glow moved closer, revealing the shape of a hunched ancient figure with a walking stick carved from black wood. The figure stopped just a few steps away. It was an old woman, older than anyone Adana had ever seen. Her skin wrinkled like dry bark, her hair white as cotton. She did not blink. Adana's lips trembled. Who are you?" she whispered. The old woman raised her stick and pointed at the hole. "Why do you return the gift the earth gave you?" Adana's knees weakened. She could not answer. The old woman's eyes narrowed, and her voice deepened, no longer sounding entirely human. "Do you think the ground will swallow your sin quietly?" Adana's breath caught in her chest. She turned to run. But the earth beneath her began to shift. Adana staggered, feeling the ground pulse beneath her feet like the heartbeat of some hidden creature. The soil at the edge of the hole swelled upward, spilling over like water. Chica's small face peeked out from under the earth, her wide, innocent eyes fixed on her mother. But then, to Adana's horror, the soil began to rise higher, pushing the baby up instead of swallowing her. The old woman's voice thundered again, though her lips barely moved. "Life cannot be buried. Not without the earth demanding a price." Adana clutched her wrapper tightly around her body, shivering. She tried to speak, but her mouth was dry. Then, before she could react, roots began snaking out from the ground, curling around her ankles. She gasped and pulled, but the more she struggled, the tighter they held. Her heart pounded so loudly she could hear it in her ears. The old woman stepped forward. Her eyes glinted like wet stones in the moonlight. "You have forgotten the law of Ilemba," she said slowly. "A child belongs not to the mother alone, but to the whole village. To take the life of one is to rob every soul of its light." Adana shook her head desperately. I didn't mean to." The old woman's voice cut her short. "You meant it enough to dig the hole." Adana felt her knees weaken as the roots tightened, forcing her to sink to the ground. She was now kneeling beside the hole where Chica lay untouched, her tiny hands reaching upward. The baby let out a soft cry, a sound so full of life that it made Adana's chest ache, though she tried to ignore it. The old woman leaned in, her face close enough that Adana could smell the faint scent of herbs and smoke. "You can still be spared," she whispered, "but only if you do exactly as I say. And if you fail, the earth will finish what you started, on you." Adana's eyes widened. "What must I do?" The old woman straightened, her bones creaking like old wood. "First, you will carry this child back to the village. You will feed her, clothe her, and keep her safe. Second, you will serve the community for 7 seasons without complaint, giving more than you take. Lastly," she paused, her gaze turning sharp, "you will open your heart, or the earth will come for it." Adana wanted to protest, to say that she could not promise such a thing. But the roots around her ankles began to twist again, sending a sharp pain shooting up her legs. She gasped and nodded quickly. "I will do it. I swear." The roots loosened immediately, sliding back into the soil as if they had never been there. Adana crawled toward the hole and lifted Chica out, holding her against her chest. The baby's warmth seeped into her skin, and for a fleeting moment, she felt something stir inside her, something she had buried as deeply as she had tried to bury her daughter. The old woman turned away, her figure melting into the shadows of the trees. But before she disappeared completely, her voice floated back. "Remember, Adana. The earth sees everything." Adana stood there for a long while, trembling, before she finally began the walk back to the village. Every step felt heavy, and though the night was quiet, she could not shake the feeling that the earth beneath her was listening. When she reached the edge of the village, The faint light of cooking fires glowed in the distance. Her arms ached from holding Chica, but she dared not set her down. She told herself she would return to her hut, rest, and forget what had happened in the forest. But as she stepped into the open, she saw 3 of the village elders waiting for her near the central fire. They were not smiling. One of them, Elder Nadazi, spoke first. "Adana," he said slowly, "we know where you have been." Her throat tightened. I went to fetch firewood." Elder Nadazi's gaze dropped to the baby in her arms. "Then why did the forest send us a warning?" Adana's heart thudded painfully. "A warning?" The other elder, Mama Ifioma, stepped forward. "The old woman of the forest came to us. She told us what you tried to do." Adana's legs nearly gave way. She wanted to run, but there was nowhere to go. Elder Nadazi's voice was firm. "Tomorrow, the whole village will decide your fate." And before she could speak, they turned and walked away, leaving her standing in the darkness. Her baby clutched to her chest, her heart pounding with dread. Adana did not sleep that night. She lay on her mat, staring at the ceiling of her hut, the shadows from the flickering oil lamp dancing above her. Chica slept soundly beside her, her small breaths steady and warm. Every time Adana closed her eyes, she saw the glowing stare of the old woman in the forest. Her voice echoed in Adana's mind like a drumbeat. "The earth sees everything." At dawn, the sharp rhythm of the village talking drum broke the silence. Its deep, commanding sound meant one thing: an urgent gathering. People emerged from their huts, whispering and exchanging curious glances. Adana's heart sank. She knew they were calling for her. She tied Chica to her back with a faded wrapper and stepped out into the cool morning air. Already, villagers were gathering in the central square beneath the great Irako tree. The elders sat in a half-circle on carved wooden stools. The chief, Okari, sat at the center, his tall cap marking his authority. The moment Adana stepped forward, murmurs rippled through the crowd. Some faces showed anger, others disappointment. Mama Ifioma rose slowly, leaning on her walking stick. "We are here," she said, her voice carrying across the square, "to speak of a crime that stains the soul of our village. Adana, you stand accused of trying to bury your own child alive." Gasps echoed through the gathering. Adana's stomach twisted. "It is true," Mama Ifioma continued. "The old woman of the forest saw you." The earth itself cried out. "And we, your own people, cannot look away from such wickedness." Chief Okari's deep voice followed. "Do you deny this, Adana?" Adana swallowed hard. She glanced around. Every eye was on her. Her pride told her to lie, but the memory of those living roots coiling around her ankles made her tremble. I will not deny it," she said at last, her voice barely above a whisper. "I was wrong." Her words caused an uproar. Some shouted that she should be banished. Others demanded she be handed to the forest spirits. A few murmured that perhaps she needed mercy, for no one knew the troubles in her heart. Elder Nadazi raised his hands to silence them. "Last night, the old woman came to me in a dream. She said Adana can be spared if she redeems herself. But redemption will not be easy." Adana's ears pricked up. She dared to hope until he went on. "For 7 seasons, Elder Nadazi said, you will serve the village. You will fetch water for the widows, work the farms of the sick, feed the children of the poor. You will take no fine clothes, no gold, and you will speak no word of complaint. Fail once, and we will return you to the forest to answer to the earth." A cold shiver ran through her body. The chief leaned forward. "Do you accept this, Adana?" Her pride screamed to refuse. But the thought of Chica's small body in that hole made her heart throb painfully. She bowed her head. "I accept." The chief nodded. "So be it. Go now. Begin your work today." The crowd slowly dispersed, though not without glares and whispers. Adana returned to her hut, her arms and legs heavy with dread. She untied Chica and set her down, but the baby reached for her, cooing softly. Adana sighed and sat beside her. She had thought her life would be easier without this child. Now it seemed her life belonged not just to her, but to everyone in Alemba. As the sun rose higher, she picked up her water pot and headed for the stream. It was the first of many tasks she would be forced to do. She was determined to endure it, but deep down a bitter seed still lived in her heart. And she did not yet know that someone in the village, someone who smiled to her face, was already planning to make her fail. The sun was fierce by midday, and Adana's back ached from carrying heavy water pots from the stream to the widow's compound. She had filled and refilled clay jars until her hands were sore. Children ran past, laughing and playing, their joy a sharp reminder of the daughter she had almost lost. Whenever Chica whimpered, Adana would pause to feed her, then return to her work. The villagers watched from their doorways, some with cold eyes, others with pity. By late afternoon, sweat dripped down her face as she hauled a bundle of firewood on her head toward Mama Ifeoma's hut. The old woman sat outside, peeling cassava, her sharp gaze following Adana's every step. "You walk like a snail," Mama Ifeoma said. "Hurry! The sun is not waiting for you." Adana bit her tongue. She wanted to snap back, but she remembered the warning. One complaint and she would be sent back to the forest. So she simply nodded, dropped the firewood and turned to leave. She had barely taken 2 steps when a voice, smooth and sweet, called from behind her. "Adana!" She turned to see Neka, her childhood friend, or rather, the woman who had once pretended to be. Neka was smiling warmly, a basket of ripe plantains on her head. Her wrapper was clean, her skin glowing from oil, and her eyes seemed to glitter with a hidden amusement. "You are working so hard," Neka said, setting the basket down. "I can help you, if you want." Adana's heart lifted slightly. Perhaps not everyone wished her harm. "You would do that?" "Of course," Neka replied. "Friends help each other. I'll even show you a quicker way to finish your tasks so you can rest earlier. But you must trust me." Adana hesitated, remembering the strange look in Neka's eyes. But her aching body won over her doubts. "All right," she said. That evening, instead of going straight to the widow's farm as she was told, Adana followed Neka into the bush. They walked along a narrow path until they reached a small clearing filled with wild yams. "See," Neka whispered. "If you dig these and take them to the widows, they will think you farmed them yourself. You'll finish your work in half the time." Adana frowned. "But these belong to no one. If someone sees me, they might think I am stealing." Neka laughed softly. "Stealing? Who owns the forest? No one will know. And if they ask, I will say I gave them to you." Adana stared at the yams. The thought of working less was tempting. But she remembered the elder's warning. Her service must be honest. Still, the weariness in her bones tugged at her. With a sigh, she took the digging stick Neka handed her. Together they filled a basket with the yams. When Adana delivered them to Mama Ifeoma's hut, the old woman narrowed her eyes. "Where did you get these? You were not at the farm today." Adana's mouth went dry. She opened her lips to answer. But before she could speak, another voice called from behind her. It was Neka. And she was smiling in a way that made Adana's stomach drop. Neka stepped forward, her hands folded neatly in front of her as if she were the most innocent soul in all of Alemba. "I saw her in the forest," Neka said sweetly, but loud enough for the nearby women to hear. "She was digging up wild yams, plenty of them. I even warned her that it might look like stealing, but—" She trailed off, giving a little shrug, her eyes glittering with false pity. "She said the elders would never know." A ripple of murmurs spread among the women gathered nearby. Mama Ifeoma's face hardened like clay in the sun. She rose to her feet, leaning on her walking stick. "Is this true?" she asked, her voice sharp. Adana's throat tightened. She wanted to cry out that Neka was lying, that this was her plan all along, but the truth was she had dug the yams. And if she denied it, Neka could twist the story further. Adana swallowed, her hands trembling. "It is true. But No excuses. Mama Ifeoma's voice boomed, cutting her off. You were told your service must be honest. This is deceit. The sound of feet shuffling came from behind as more villagers gathered. Elder Nadazi arrived, his tall frame casting a shadow over Adana. He looked from her to the yams, then to Neka. Do you know what happens when you break the covenant of redemption, Adana? He asked slowly. Her heart thudded painfully. Please, it will not happen again. I was tired and— Enough, Elder Nadazi said, his tone final. He turned to the crowd. She will be taken to the forest tonight. The old woman will decide if she deserves another chance, or if the earth will claim her. A gasp rose from the villagers. Adana's knees weakened. No, please. I will work harder. But the elders had already decided. By nightfall, 2 young men, Okachukwu and Chidi, arrived at her hut. We are to escort you, Chidi said, avoiding her eyes. Adana wrapped Chika tightly against her back, her hands trembling so badly that she almost dropped the knot of her wrapper. She didn't know what awaited her in the forest, but the memory of those twisting roots and the cold, shifting earth made her stomach churn with fear. The moon was high and silver as they reached the same clearing where she had tried to bury Chika. The place seemed even darker now, the trees looming like silent judges. Kachukwu stopped. This is where we leave you, he said quietly. The old woman will come. And then the 2 men turned and disappeared down the path, leaving Adana alone in the eerie stillness. The wind picked up, whispering through the leaves. Chika stirred and whimpered on her back. Then, from the shadows between the trees, the old woman emerged. Her eyes glowed faintly in the moonlight. You have broken your word, Adana, she said, her voice like the rumble of distant thunder. The earth is not patient with liars. Adana dropped to her knees, clutching Chika tightly. Please, give me one more chance. I was tricked. But the old woman raised her walking stick, striking it against the ground. The earth beneath Adana's knees began to tremble, and slowly, the soil opened. The ground split with a deep, groaning sound, like some great beast waking from its sleep. Dust rose into the air, and a foul, earthy smell filled Adana's nose. She scrambled back, but the crack widened, and from its depths came a sound, low, wet and gurgling, that made her blood run cold. Do you feel it? The old woman's voice rumbled. This is the mouth of the earth. It swallows what is not wanted, and it does not return it. Adana shook her head violently, tears streaming down her face. Please, I want my child. I want to make things right. The old woman's eyes glinted like coals. You wanted freedom. You thought this child was a chain. But life is never a chain unless your heart is bound in greed. The crack in the earth began to pull at the soil beneath Adana's hands, dragging small stones and dry leaves into its depths. She clutched Chika tightly to her chest, her arms aching, her whole body trembling. I was foolish, Adana cried. I let my pride blind me. I will work, honestly this time. Please do not take me. For a long moment, the old woman simply stared at her, the wind howling around them. Then, slowly, the pull of the earth stopped. The crack sealed itself with a shudder, leaving only a jagged scar in the dirt. The old woman's voice softened, but it still held the weight of iron. You will return to the village. But know this, if you fail again, the earth will not wait for my call. It will take you itself. Adana nodded quickly, still clutching her baby. I understand. The old woman stepped closer, placing a cold, bony hand on Chika's head. The baby gurgled softly, as if sensing no danger from her. This child will grow, the old woman said, and one day she will see the truth of her mother's heart. From this night onward, every choice you make will shape what she sees. Adana lowered her head, shame burning her cheeks. When she looked up, the old woman was gone. The forest was silent again. Adana stood slowly, her knees weak, and began the long walk back to the village. She didn't know how she would face the elders or the whispers of the people, but she knew one thing. This time she could not afford even a single misstep. But as she reached the edge of the village, she saw a figure waiting for her in the shadows. It was Neka, and she was smiling. Neka stepped out from the shadows, her wrapper rustling softly in the night breeze. "My dear friend," she said in a voice dripping with false sweetness, "you're back alive. I wasn't sure the old woman would spare you this time." Adana tightened her grip on Chica, the baby shifting uneasily against her chest. "Why are you here, Neka?" she asked, her voice low and wary. Neka tilted her head, pretending to be hurt. "Is that how you speak to the only person who cared enough to help you?" Adana's jaw clenched. "Help? You led me into trouble. You wanted me to fail." Neka smiled wider, her eyes gleaming like a cat's in the dark. "And if I did, do you think the village will ever forgive you? You will serve them forever, but they will still whisper, still point, still remember." Adana's heart pounded. She could not deny the truth in Neka's words, but she also knew this was a trap. Neka wanted her to lose hope. "What do you want from me?" Adana asked finally. Neka's voice dropped to a conspiratorial whisper. "I want you to leave. Tonight. Take the child and disappear into the bush. I know a trader who will give you gold and fine clothes in exchange for her. You could have the life you wanted. Freedom, comfort, no more backbreaking work." Adana felt the old bitterness stir in her chest, the same hunger for escape that had led her to the forest the first time. The idea of being free from the endless judgment of the villagers was tempting. But then she remembered the cold voice of the old woman, the way the earth had opened beneath her. She shook her head slowly. "No." Neka's smile faded, replaced by a flash of annoyance. "Think carefully, Adana. This is your only chance. If you keep serving these people, you will die their servant." "I'd rather die with honor," Adana said, her voice firm for the first time. Neka's eyes narrowed. "We'll see." Without another word, she turned and melted into the shadows, leaving Adana standing alone with the cool night wind pressing against her skin. She returned to her hut, but her mind was restless. If Neka was willing to go this far, she would not stop. And next time, she might strike in a way that would leave Adana no room to defend herself. The following morning, as the rooster's crow echoed across Alemba, Adana rose early and began her work before the elders could even call her. She swept the central square, fetched water for the sick, and pounded yam for the orphan children. She moved quickly with no complaint, even when her muscles screamed in protest. By midday, some of the villagers began to take notice. Mama Ifioma passed her while she was carrying a heavy basket of maize. She stopped, studied Adana for a moment and said, "Perhaps there is still some good in you." The words, simple as they were, warmed Adana's chest. But before she could reply, the sharp sound of the talking drum broke through the air again. 3 urgent beats repeated. Something had happened. She followed the sound to the square, where Elder Nadazi stood, his face grave. "A child is missing," he announced. "Little Obina, son of the blacksmith. He was last seen playing near the forest." A chill ran through Adana. And then, from the corner of the crowd, she caught sight of Neka. She was smiling. Adana's stomach twisted into knots the moment she saw that smile. It wasn't the smile of someone concerned for a missing child. It was the smile of someone who already knew where the child was. She kept her gaze steady, trying not to give herself away, but Neka's eyes locked onto hers for just a heartbeat, long enough to send a silent message. "Told you. You should have listened." Elder Nadazi continued speaking. "The sun will set in a few hours. We must find Obina before night falls. The forest is no place for a child after dark." A group of men grabbed their machetes and headed toward the bush. Women called out the boy's name while searching the nearby paths. Adana shifted uneasily, glancing at Neka, who now stood chatting lightly with another woman, pretending to join the concern. Adana thought of what the old woman had told her. The earth sees everything. If Neka had taken the boy, then the forest would know. And perhaps it would show her the truth. She strapped Chica onto her back and slipped away from the crowd, heading down a narrow footpath that led to the same deep part of the forest where she had once faced judgment. The air there felt different, heavier, older. When she reached the clearing, she stopped and listened. "Old Mother," she whispered into the stillness. "I know I have no right to ask you for anything, but a child is in danger. If you can hear me, please show me where he is." For a moment there was only silence. Then a low rustling began in the undergrowth, moving in a slow circle around her. The leaves trembled though no wind blew. The soil shifted under her feet, forming strange patterns. She stepped back and gasped. The lines in the dirt were shaping into a trail, an arrow pointing deeper into the forest. Adana didn't hesitate. She followed it, her heart pounding. The trail twisted between thick roots and hanging vines, leading her to a hidden grove. And there, under the shade of a giant iroko tree, she saw him. Little Obina was sitting on the ground, chewing on a piece of roasted yam, looking dazed but unharmed. But standing over him was Neka. Her arms were crossed, her face calm, but her eyes widened in shock when she saw Adana. "You!" Neka hissed. "How?" "Let him go, Neka," Adana said, stepping forward. "This is between you and me." Neka's lips curled into a smirk. "If I let him go, who will believe you didn't take him? You already have the reputation. One word from me, and the elders will drag you here in chains. The old woman won't save you this time." Adana's fists tightened. She could feel the earth beneath her shift ever so slightly, as though listening. Then, without warning, the ground under Neka's feet began to crack. Her smirk vanished.